Improving quality depends on having a reliable, repeatable, capable process. And everybody knows that, but it's difficult sometimes to recognize whether you have a process or not. Just following the same sort of routine isn't necessarily a process and might be something closer to a superstitious dance. I got a chance one time to work with a company that makes margarine down in Minnesota, and here from the Twin Cities, if you drive south down I-35 for a while, you get to where this factory is, and they had a problem. They had some quality problems, and so I said, okay, I went down there and walked into the place. And I don't know if you've ever been in a margarine factory before, but the whole place smells like the inside of a microwave popcorn bag. I don't know, you imagine what that smells like. They said it smelled like money, but I'm not quite sure. I think it smelled worse than that. And I said, all right, well, you guys had some quality problems. You wanted me to come down and talk to you for a while. What are the natures of the quality problems? And they said, well, one of the first problems that we have, our biggest problem, is some little old lady in a Bob Evans restaurant in Muncie, Indiana will try to open up the tab on the margarine and they won't be able to open it. This 80-year-old doesn't have the strength to peel it all back. And she complains to the manager, and the manager complains to the regional manager, and the regional manager tells the CEO of Bob Evans, and they tell the CEO of the margarine company, and everybody runs around for a while. But we really can't fix that because we're making hundreds and thousands of margarine cups every hour. So, but at least we have to deal with it. But that's not the issue that we wanted to talk to you about. I said, oh, okay, well, what is it that you wanted to talk to me about? It said, sometimes when we make margarine, the margarine doesn't come out good. I said, okay, well, how do you make margarine? Well, they said, well, you have to understand first what happens is a big corn oil truck comes in and we hook up the hose of the corn oil truck and we glug it into this big vat there. And when it's in the vat, you know, we stir it around for a while and we put in the corn oil and stuff like that, and we put in flavoring and we put in coloring and we put in vitamins and things. And then that stirs for a while and then it goes out to blending. And where it's blending, it starts to whoosh around, and they've got liquid nitrogen, and we shoot liquid nitrogen there in there to cool it while we're blending it, and as we blend it, then it goes off to packaging. And there's a great big reel of aluminum foil that comes down from the ceiling and another reel of plastic that comes from the bottom, and they actually form the little plastic cups immediately before they fill the cup. So this little iron goes up and presses against the plastic and vacuum extracts the little cups, and they plop in the margarine, and the tin foil comes down and it goes over this wax, and the plastic and the tin foil come through there, and the knives cut it going this way and the knives cut it going that way, and there's hundreds of thousands of cups of margarine that go down. And I said, all right, well, that's real fascinating, but how do you know if the margarine is good or not? Well, let's go to the whiteboard and find out. They told me when we go to test margarine, what we do is we start with a 2x4. We take this piece of wood and we cut a trough in the middle of it. And once we cut the trough in the middle of it, we take a nail and we hammer a nail in one end of the 2x4. And then we put an alligator clip on that nail and run a wire to a battery. And we run another wire from a battery to a light bulb. And then another wire from the light bulb to another alligator clip. And that alligator clip then is attached to a nail that we hammer in on the other side of the 2x4. And then what we do is we take a big bucket of margarine, we scoop out some, and we smush it right in here on the trough and fill a bunch of the margarine in. And if the light bulb goes on, the margarine's no good. And I said, what? And they said, well, that's how we can tell if the margarine's no good. And I said, well, how do you know that? And they said, well, you have to understand, when we make this, there's a little bit of corn oil and there's a lot of moisture. And that freaked me out right there because I'm not sure what the chemical makeup of moisture is, but this is what they're putting in the margarine is moisture. And as the margarine is being made and the oil is mixing with the moisture and it starts to blend, what happens is that the oil emulsifies the moisture, or the corn oil wraps around the little moisture molecules or atoms or whatever it is that moisture is made up of. And if all of the moisture is adequately emulsified, then you can't get electricity to go through. But back here at the whiteboard, as we can see, when the corn oil hasn't emulsified, then the light bulb goes on. And I thought, leave it to people from Minnesota to figure out how to test margarine using jumper cables. So I said, all right, well, where are the different ways that we can start looking at this process? We need to start measuring some of the variables to make that better. What sort of measurements do you have now? And they said, we don't know. And I said, all right, well, let's look at this again. So what happens? And they say, well, this truck comes in. We got this truck that's full of corn oil. And we hook up a hose. And the hose starts glugging all this stuff into the vat here, and it mixes for a while, and then we shoot in the flavoring, we shoot in the coloring, we shoot in some vitamins and stuff like that, and then it goes over to where it's going to blend, and then it blends for a while, and we shoot in some liquid nitrogen into this thing here, and I said, all right, how about when the blending here? Is it better to have low temperature and high blender speeds, or higher temperature and lower blender speeds? And they said, I don't know. I said, all right, let's look for opportunities to measure stuff back. Let's go all the way back here to the beginning. They said, oh, look, we already told you. The truck comes in, we hook up the hose to the truck, we glug it into the big vat, and we put in the moisture, and we start blending all this stuff, and we shoot in the flavoring, and we shoot in the coloring, and we shoot in the vitamins and stuff. And I said, okay, wait, right there, right there. How much flavoring do you shoot in? And they said, 2 minutes worth. And I said, what? And they said, 2 minutes worth. And I said, does that mean a pint? Does that mean a quart? Is that 5? They said, we don't know, 2 minutes worth. And I said, does anybody ever get to calibrate any of these? Oh, no, you calibrate the machines and you get fired. I said, does anybody ever touch the machines that's spraying this stuff in? They say, well, yeah, once a year, somebody from the factory who knows about this stuff comes in and they set all the switches and they set all the knobs and things like that, and they tell us, don't touch a thing because we know what we're doing, and if you touch anything, you're fired. And the margarine works pretty well for about 3 or 4 or 5 months or so, but after 5 months, the light bulb goes on. And that's when the light bulb went on. These people think they have a process, but they really don't have a process. What they have is a rain dance. And they think that by following the same steps over and over, the rains are going to come. Or they're throwing maidens off of the volcanoes so that the cargo ships come back like that. When really they didn't have a process at all. They were just shooting in 2 minutes worth of margarine. Anyway, we put some systems in place. We started to measure it. We started to see some of the different variations. And in conclusion, we were able to improve the quality of the margarine that was coming out of there. And if I were you, I would keep eating butter. Thank you very much.